22 short versus 22 long versus 22 long rifle. I'm going to be testing these through my little 1.875-inch Ruger LCR revolver. So our 22 short is a 29 grain bullet. Our 22 long is also a 29 grain bullet. And our 22 long rifle is a 40 grain bullet. So the history of these cartridges go way back. The 22 short was actually the first American metallic cartridge ever created. It was made specifically for the Smith & Wesson Model 1 revolver. It was made specifically for self-defense. So when you're talking like a modern day 9mm Smith & Wesson Shield pistol, pretty much the origins of that idea came from the 22 short, to have a small personal protection handgun. So the 22 short was created in 1857, and all they did was they loaded it with 4 grains of black powder. The 22 long was created in 1871, and they lengthened the case a little bit, and they added 5 grains of black powder, made it a little bit more powerful. And the 22 long rifle was created in 1887. That's our most popular cartridge nowadays. And they used the 22 long case. They used the same powder charge, 5 grains of black powder, but they put a 40 grain bullet, and that actually made it more powerful because a 22 long 29 grain bullet would actually clear the barrel of a rifle before it could use up that powder, as where the 22 long rifle stayed in the barrel a little bit longer, had more inertia, so you actually had a more powerful cartridge with the same powder charge. So I'm going to test all these through our little Ruger LCR revolver and a ballistic test just to kind of see how they do. And I did pick the target rounds with all of them because you really don't want a hollow point when you're talking a short barrel revolver and 22 long rifle, because you want to try to get as much penetration as possible. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics to see what the best possible potential of those are, see what kind of penetration we get with that. And then I'll move on to doing more of a real world simulation. I'm going to have 4 layers, or actually 2 layers of t-shirt on this first 3-inch piece. It's kind of redundant with a test like this because I'm not using hollow points, but I like to stay consistent. Followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, then a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. And then I'll give us kind of our bone test to see how well these would do through ribs or sternum. So we'll do our regular ballistic test, plain clear ballistics gel shot, and then we'll do our real world simulation. And then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 22 short 29 grain copper wash round. This is rated at 1,080 feet per second, and that's going to be through a rifle barrel. All these velocity ratings are through rifle barrels, but let's see what we get with our 22 short 29 grain bullet here. .865, 854, 846, 865, 833. So to be honest, that's actually a lot more velocity than what I would have thought I would have got with something like that. Our 22 long, same bullet, but this is rated at 1215 feet per second, so that's 125 feet per second higher rating. And both the short and the long were designed as pistol bullets, really. 22 long. See if we get more velocity than the short there. Got an empty chamber in the front here. All right, see what we get here. 921. 921. 903. 848. 906. So definitely a little bit more velocity there. 22 long rifle. This is rated at 1235 feet per second, and it is a 40 grain bullet. So we'll see how we do with our 22 long rifle. See what we get here. .904, 886, 858, 883, 898. So not much different than our 22 long. However, our bullet is 11 grains heavier, so it's going to be a little bit more powerful. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how all these compare. All right, first up we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot. No fabric in the way, no rib simulation that can slow down its potential for penetration. So let's see what all of these will do through our plain clear ballistics shot. So here's our 22 short. All right, 22 long. And 22 long rifle. Let's go take a look. All right, so pretty similar results with all of those, to be honest. In the first 3-inch piece here, not a big difference here, but honestly, when I look at the 22 long, there's actually a little bit more tearing in the first 3-inch piece, a little bit more tearing versus all of these going into the gel block there. So pretty similar performance overall, except that our long rifle definitely penetrated a lot better. So our 22 short, we got a total penetration of about 11¼ inches, so that's a little bit shallow in modern terms for the penetration. But our 22 long, actually, we got about 14 inches of penetration, which exceeds the minimum penetration that you want to see for self-defense of that 12-inch number. So it's actually pretty good overall. And our 22 long rifle actually got even less than that, about 13½ inches of penetration. So that's very interesting there. So we can see that there probably was a reason with quote-unquote real-world testing back in the 19th century why they went from a short to a long. So yeah, there's a little bit of history there we can see playing out in a gel block, because 22 short probably wasn't enough penetration to effectively work well for self-defense. And that's really what the 22 short and 22 long were created for. It's very interesting. Let's put on our fabric, put in our rib simulation, and see how these do in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 2 layers of t-shirt material, which is redundant because there's no hollow points here to clog. 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. You got to remember this is about half representation of the density of flesh. So whatever we get in there is going to be about half that far in a real living target. So real world simulation. Let's see what we get here with our 22 short. All right. 22 long. And 22 long rifle. Let's go take a look. All right, again, our 22 long actually penetrated the most. Take a look here at our rib simulation. And it looks like our short went through straight, but our long is starting to wobble a little bit, and our long rifle is starting to wobble a little bit. So starting to yaw. And I suspect what's going on here is similar to what's happening with the Federal Punch 22 long rifle, where because the bullets are shorter, because they're only 29 grain, if they do start to wobble or tumble, it doesn't really create that much resistance, because going through sideways, they're still not that wide. The long wise, they're not that wide going sideways. So we still continue to get good penetration. So our 22 short is a little bit subpar. He only got about 10¼ inches, but honestly, that's not bad. That's enough penetration with a front shot to hit something vital. Our 22 long, which is the winner here, we got about 13 inches of penetration after going through rib simulation. That's pretty good. And then our 22 long rifle, a little bit more damage going into this block here. And we got about 11 3/4. So looking at this with our real world simulation, I honestly think our 22 long and a round nose out of a short barreled handgun like this is probably your best bet. I think it performed better than the 22 long rifle. Now that being said, most people are still going to use the 22 long rifle because it's available, but this is interesting. It's very eye-opening, and we can see that, you know, the 22 short and 22 long were developed for pistols, specifically for pistols. The 22 long rifle was made longer for a rifle, and we can see that there's a little bit of stabilization issues. So that's very interesting. Let's pull these bullets out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. I'll shoot our steel target and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at our bullets, our 22 short, our 22 long, and our 22 long rifle. So here's our 22 short bullets. And the one through our plain gel right here, there's not much change to that bullet. And the one going through our rib simulation over here, there's a little bit of scuffing of that bullet and a little bit of deformation, but it's pretty minimal with our 22 short. Our 22 long, we actually have a little bit difference between our plain gel shot here and our real world simulation here. So our plain gel shot here, there's really no change to that bullet. And then through our real world simulation, the bullet bent a little bit. So definitely a little bit more force on that bullet through a real world simulation, but not much change really overall. And our long rifle, and the one through our plain gel is right here. Not much difference there. And then through a real world simulation, yeah, that bent and yawed, you can tell that's the way it impacted that rib simulation, then yawed. And when it does that, it's going through real, wide. And if you compare that to, like, let's say a short here or a long, the bullet length, you're going to be going this way at some point, and you have a lot more resistance with that long rifle bullet. So I think that's why we got some of the results that we got. So interesting overall. So let's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, I'm about 15 yards from the target right here, and we'll just see what kind of practical shootability all these things have. So I'm gonna get a sight picture, pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target, and see if there's a big difference here. So here's our 22 short. All right. The shootability, those are really, really good. 22 long here. Also a 29 grain. We'll see if there's a big difference here in the way these things shoot. I think those shorts grouped a little bit tighter. We'll see how the 22 long rifle shoots. All right, to be honest, I can't tell a difference really with any of these other than the short and the long had just a hair less recoil. So let me back it up and see if these shoot better from some distance than what this gun was shooting for me, at least when I first unboxed it. All right, I'm about 75 yards from the target. I know this is kind of ridiculous, but I find it kind of fun just to launch stuff at that distance. See if I can make any hits with these. So 22 short. I'll try to figure out where these are going. All right, so I just had to aim one man over to the right to make those hits because, those rounds are just simply shooting a little bit to the left for me. So 22 long, a little bit more power, same bullet. See what I can do with our long. right, so first few shots there where I completely missed, I was aiming one man over to the right, and then I just aimed center, and then they were starting to hit, and then the last few shots I pulled. But it seems like this revolver wants to shoot the 22 long center a little bit better than the other rounds, which is kind of surprising. Now we have our 22 long rifle here. So I'm not sure how these things are going to shoot. I'll aim a little bit to the right in my first shot, see where it goes. I'll aim center. I tried a whole bunch of different things there, and I wasn't really getting the results I was hoping for. I couldn't see where they're hitting. So I'm going to try just a few more, just to see if I can figure out where these long rifles are going. So I'll keep trying here. I'll try a few different holds. I am just like a half a man to the right. So with that, I can't be quite as consistent. I'll give up there with that. But yeah, just some surprising results overall. So looking at this, if I had to pick one of these for defense based solely on the terminal ballistics, I'm going to pick the 22 long, which you think, what is going on 22 long? But it does make sense. And I think that's why Federal developed the 22 long rifle punch the way that they did. They probably did some testing and found that a 29 grain bullet, which they use for the punch, penetrates a little bit better, and then they just made it a flat nose. And it makes total sense, because if you start to get destabilization, which is gonna happen with 22 long rifle or 22 short or whatever, well, if the bullet's only, this tall, well, if it starts to yaw, the length of that bullet isn't a whole lot wider going sideways than what it is the actual diameter. So therefore, if it starts to tumble, it'll continue to go deep. As where the 22 long rifle really is kind of a rifle-shaped bullet for a pistol, and it is, when it starts to yaw, which it will, then it slows it down too much. Now, 22 short, that was really accurate, but there's just not enough charge there. So I'm gonna have to be that silly guy on the internet that says 22 long is probably better than 22 long rifle for a snub nose revolver. Interesting test. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.